Morning, everyone. Morning, colleagues.
Morning, Stuart.
Morning, Ivan. How are you?
Okay.
Good.
Morning, Sunday. Can you hear me?
Hi, Cindy. Good morning. Hi, Skura.
Morning.
Hi, Prof. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Thank you. Nice to see you guys.
Good. You?
It was. Oh, hi, Brian.
Morning, Brian.
Morning all.
And Mike.
Morning, Mike.
How's it?
Morning all.
Morning, colleagues, and thank you so much for joining. Before I introduce our speaker today, I'd like us to have a moment of silence for a departed colleague of ours, Barry Damerel, who passed away recently. Just a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Today we have Dr. Cindy Walters. KwaZulu-Natal means a lot to Cindy. She studied architecture here at the university and went on to found Walters and Cohen Architects with her classmate, Michael Cohen. 30 years later, the London-based practice boasts an impressive portfolio of education and cultural projects across the UK and internationally. Cindy remains actively involved with universities and architectural institutions, and in 2022 completed a PhD by architectural practice at the Bartlett School of Architecture. Cindy, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you for inviting me. I'm going to, I think that was probably enough of an introduction, and I'll speak about lots of things during the course of this presentation. It's about an hour, or maybe a bit less, and there's going to be lots of time for questions at the end, which is the part I usually enjoy the most. I'm just going to share my screen and presentation up. Right, can everybody see?
Yeah, we're good.
That? Brilliant. So I've called this talk Building a Portfolio, and I'm going to speak about a lot of things. But that first image I'll circle back to is a Buddhist retreat that we designed in Suffolk in England, which is a project that's very close to my heart. Well, they're all very close to my heart. But I'll come back and speak a bit more about this one in particular, because it was an extraordinary privilege to be the architects of a project like it. So I'm going to speak about, the lecture's kind of divided into 5 parts. I was going to speak a bit about the early days and then focus on building a portfolio. And the reason for talking about this was that, I mean, Michelle and I've had, I'm sure, a fair bit of luck, but we have, the connections you make and the clients you meet and the way things fall into place sometimes is not really by luck. It's usually by hard work. So I'll talk quite a lot about that and how that's been for us. And then I'll talk a little bit more about other stuff, well, my PhD a little bit, life outside the practice, because you know, all of us, I think, who run practices or work in practice have the opportunity to use it as a springboard to do other things. And I really enjoy all the things that we do. I get to do outside of practice, which is quite a lot. And then, you know, 30 years later, of course, we'd be a bit irresponsible not to be thinking about the future. We have incredible members of staff, many of whom have been with us almost since the beginning. And so, you know, what happens to an architectural practice when it's, you know, it's at the stage that ours is at? You know, we're not a young practice anymore. We're not a new practice anymore. We're very established. So where does it go from here? So I'll touch on that at the end. So the first section is on sort of the early days and establishing ourselves, making contacts, and winning work. And you know, when Michelle and I started the practice, we were both under 30. We had no idea what we were doing. We were not from the UK. We hadn't been to school there. We didn't have the sort of network that some people might have. People warned us not to start a practice. They said we would fail. We were the first two women in the UK to start an architectural practice together, which I still find extraordinary. We only found that out about 10 years in, when we gave a lecture at the Glasgow School of Art, and somebody introduced us and said we were the first two women to start an architectural practice in the UK. And we looked at each other and thought, that's impossible, that can't be right. But we've never managed to prove them wrong. So we take the credit now, happily. So, you know, it was even a very well-meaning male colleague even said to us, you know, at the very beginning, he said, you know, you're going to struggle. It's a very male-dominated industry. Women generally don't succeed. He obviously hadn't heard of Zaha Hadid, but he said, you know, if you need me to come to a meeting with you, you know, I will. And we said, thanks, you know, we'll bear that in mind. And we set up a little office. We rented some desk space from another firm of architects, because one of the things we were sort of determined to do was not to work out of our, you know, living room or for our kitchen table. You know, we wanted to be serious architects and have our own office. So we rented this desk space in a firm. The office was called Monk and Beck and Marshall. They don't exist anymore. And we had a couple of desks at the front. And the first thing, one of the first significant things we did was enter the competition for the KZNSA Gallery. And we had, those of you who, some people here probably remember that competition. You didn't have to do very much to qualify to enter. You had to write a statement, I think, a motivational statement to say to sort of demonstrate that you understood the climate. And we did that, and we entered the competition and we won it. And I think it's still possibly one of the buildings I'm most proud of. So, and that's the first sketch I think I did for the competition. And so Michelle and I met on the first day of first year, and at Durban University. She looked so young that I thought she must have been somebody's little sister who'd come along for the day. You can see in this photograph top left that, and she's about 30 then, she still looks pretty young. And that was us probably, I don't know, maybe a year or two after we'd started the practice, top left. And the bottom left images is me and my husband, who'd helped us make the model for the KZNSA competition, and we were just checking it before we packaged it up and sent it across to Durban. And we very quickly had to move from our little desk in Munkenbecker Marshal's office. So the middle top image is our first studio. We rented a proper space and we could fit about 12 people in there. And we very, very quickly sort of expanded into the space. And then we moved to the studio that you see bottom in the middle bottom, which is where we are now. And it's a converted Sunday school building, and it's an amazing studio. And the image on the right is our 20. We pride ourselves on having good parties, and the image on the right is a party that we had to celebrate our 20th birthday, which I seem to remember got quite out of hand. But so that, there's been this kind of evolution of us taking space, moving into it, growing to fit the space. And we then bought the building in the image on the right. So now we can't move. So the practice has stayed at about, we've hovered between 20 and 30 people for many, many years now. So KZNSA Gallery was one of our first competition wins. There's photographs taken by Dennis Gilbert in the very early, when it was recently opened. This concept of connecting the park to the street, using this sort of veranda space on the side of the building as circulation, making use of the levels across the site, is a theme that's come up again and again and again in later projects. It was a very simple building. I remember the first meeting we had with the client. He said, "We've only got this much money, so if it goes over budget, you're going to have to pay." And we did stick to the budget, and we did deliver the project on time and on budget. And unlike many competitions we've won since in the UK, I think we were told on a Friday that we'd won the competition. And on Monday, we got a fax saying, "Where are you? We want to get started." We win competitions these days and nothing happens for a year or sometimes longer, or the client still has to raise the money. But here we from winning the competition to opening the building, I think was just a little bit more than a year. It didn't take very long at all. And I still love coming to the building and queuing up and having to get a cup of coffee and coming to the exhibitions. And it's as I say, it's been a kind of labor of it's just a project that's very close to my heart. And these photographs were taken 20 years for the gallery's 20th birthday in 2015. And it was, and I still go regularly and photograph it and keep in touch with people there. So it was a great start. We then moved on to, at the time, everybody was building health clubs. There was just suddenly this kind of explosion of health clubs in the UK. I think they were seen as a good business. And we ended up working for a client who we'd worked with. At our very first project we ever delivered was a conversion of the top floor of a block of flats on the King's Road in London. And we divided them into 4 flats, and they were called loft apartments, and nobody had ever heard of loft apartments. And so it was all very kind of cool and trendy. And they sold them for crazy amounts of money to people like Ringo Starr. And the client was so over the moon that with how this development had gone. I think they thought we had the Midas touch. So they also owned a chain of health clubs called Holmes Place. So we ended up doing one Holmes Place health club after the next, which was great because it got us going and got us into, we had a whole other seam of work. And the top left image we weren't allowed to take a lot of photographs of this project because it was in the vaults of the Bank of England, which we converted into a health club for them. So the seam of work for Holmes Place led to us doing a project in the Bank of England, winning a competition and then doing a project in the Bank of England. And the red colour, for anybody who knows anything about the Bank of England, was the colour chosen by John Soane who designed the original bank building, for the uniforms of the people who had to, the guards who had to be outside, was this kind of dark pinky red. So we used that color throughout this health club. And we went in to present to the governor of the Bank of England, and showed him these kind of palette of pink and red. And he said, "What, even in the men's?" And we said, "Yes." And he said, "Okay, that's fine." So, off we went, and that project's been there and is still there, and still looks great, actually, many years later. And the image on the right was probably the last project we did for Holmes Place, which was sort of a bit inspired by Peter Zumthor's baths at Vals, because it was all about, therapy and water and sports, therapy for sports injuries. And we, like any growing practice, we were doing, residential projects. The one on the left is a small house just near where I live now, and we actually won. On the back of that little residential project, we won a competition for the Centre of Photography at Margam Castle in Wales. And it was just because the client liked how we had dealt with an existing listed building and added something new. And the project on the right is a house in Sydney. And this, they came to us because they'd seen the KZNSA Gallery, but also they phoned us up and said, "We've bought this site." And I mean, what a site. It's in Sydney, near just up from Bondi Beach, and it's got this 80-meter sandstone cliffs that sort of crash down into the Pacific Ocean. There was a funny little bungalow house on the site that they wanted to demolish, and we ended up building this kind of upside-down house for them, with the bedrooms on the lower level and the living room on the upper level. And it's still, I mean, I've been there a number of times since it's been finished, and it's an amazing setting. But they called us up and said, "Would you like to do this house?" And we said, "Why? I mean, there's so many great architects in Sydney, and we're 27 hours away." And they said, "Well, don't say no yet. We'll send you a video of the site." So they'd gone up in a helicopter, I think, and flown around and taken all this footage of the site, and they sent us a video by post. And I showed it to Michelle, and I said, "We can't say no." So we didn't, and we designed the project, and they became firm friends. But we've never really done a lot of residential. We've done the odd house for friends, but somehow we never quite moved into doing a lot of residential work. The next sort of seam of work we started doing was nursery schools, and we did a number of these. They were another client who was designing day nurseries in places like business parks and weird and wonderful places, and we did about 7 of these day nurseries. And so we got to a point, we were about 5 years into our practice. It was around about 2000. And our accountant sat us down, and we had a very solemn conversation. And he said, "Look, this is not good. You've got 2 seams of work. One is health clubs, and one is these day nurseries. And you're doing the odd little residential project." And he said, "If either of these clients disappears or stops doing this work, you're going to be in big trouble. So you need to find some other way of earning a living." So we sat down, and we had a proper serious discussion about what we could do. And we thought, what do we want to be doing? And what we wanted to be doing, we discussed, was working in education. We didn't really know what that meant. We just thought it sounded quite nice. And we also, we didn't know how to go about doing that. So we thought, well, the only thing we were good at, we thought, was designing. So we thought we'd go and win some competitions. Well, as all of you will know, that's a lot easier said than done. But the first competition we entered was for a sustainable primary school. It was run by the RIBA, and we entered it. And it was never meant to be built. It was an ideas competition, but we entered that and won. And then we used the ideas from that competition, which were all about sustainability, really, using how you design a sustainable building, using passive measures, was something that, you know, has made its way. Ideas from that competition still make their way into the projects, into our projects today. And I'll come back to that project a bit later on. But then quite soon after that, we won a competition for the Yehudi Menuhin School, a specialist music school in Surrey. And that was a big deal for us. It was the first competition that we'd won in the UK. It was, you know, won in a pretty sort of tricky shortlist, and we were thrilled to win it. It must have been the year 2000, because a lot of people in New York had pledged money for this project, and when 9/11 happened, all of that money got diverted to other places. So Yehudi Menuhin had just died. He was an incredibly well-known, famous violinist, which you will know. And this was going to be his memorial, a recital hall and a new music school. So unfortunately, we never got to build that project. We did go back and do a project for them many years later, but this project never happened, which was, again, this amazing, with this very simple idea of containing the building within a wall, and the wall being there to protect the site. It's very close to the M25 motorway, so very noisy, not great for a music school. So we wrapped the whole project up in this big, heavy wall, and used the slope of the ground to create this amphitheatre, kind of much like the KZNSA Gallery. And then somebody on the governing body of the Yehudi Menuhin School was also on the governing body of a very famous sort of hippie school in Hampshire called Bedales. And they put us on the shortlist for this project, which we won in 2003, and built this building, which is a general teaching building. And this was a real challenge. You can't see in these photographs, but it's very close to a Grade 1 listed building. It was in a national park. There were all kinds of planning constraints that we hadn't really had to deal with up to now. And we had to really think hard about the materiality. We wanted to choose material. We didn't want the site is kind of defined by buildings that have the same color roof and walls. So we chose this Siberian larch for the walls, because we knew it would silver down, and stainless steel for the roof, so that it would weather and become one color. And this started a sort of, I suppose, a lifelong fascination with how you detail buildings so that they last and so that they weather well. And we've continued that throughout the rest of our time. We then entered a competition for, we were invited to take part in a competition. The new Labour government had just come in. We're up to about 1997 now, well, back to 1997 actually. And the Labour government came in. They wanted to do these exemplar schools, school designs that could be rolled out all over the country. We were asked to do a primary school, sort of what's known as a two-form entry primary school here. And we designed a prototypical school. And one of the key things, we used all the lessons that we'd learned from the sustainable primary school that we designed a few years before, but we also took out all the corridors. So this idea of removing corridors and aggregating that space so that you don't waste space with corridors has been a theme that we've repeated throughout many of our education projects. So this space in the center that you see here was essentially all the circulation space lumped into one space that the students could all access. And every classroom had an outdoor teaching space and then direct access to the outside, and all of the front part, the main arrival space that was accessed off this main arrival space, and it was all the spaces that are accessed by the community. And that led to many projects, which I'll talk about in a minute, both primary and secondary schools that were rolled out in something called the Building Schools for the Future program. And the last Labour government in this country spent a lot of money on upgrading the education estate. They weren't all new buildings. A lot of them were updating and refurbishing existing buildings. But there was a time when, you know, this research and investment in the education estate was really, sort of really put the UK at the front of what was happening around the world in education. And sadly, the next government came along and slashed the funding, and there hasn't been any investment in the education estate and the state system for many years now. It's just starting again now under this new government. So, and then, you know, having won an art gallery competition virtually as we started our practice, we thought, you know, we'd win, you know, we'd go on to design art galleries. We were quite excited about that. The image on the right actually is the National Centre for Photography in Wales. It's a Grade 1 listed building that has the art gallery inside it, and it burned. The interior was destroyed in a fire. So we had sort of free reign to do whatever we wanted internally, which was a very contemporary interior. That project never happened because they never managed to get the funding together. The one on the left, the Working Art Gallery, we were shortlisted for, again in one of these kind of stellar shortlists that included all the great and the good. The one in the middle, the Hepworth Gallery in Wakefield, was a funny story because we were shortlisted with Zaha Hadid, David Chipperfield, David Adjei, Kenga Kuma, Snow Hetta. I mean, it was just a ridiculous shortlist, and us, you know, we were the kind of new kids on the block. And we didn't win the competition, but the leader of the council, who was on the jury, phoned us up on the Monday and said, "I'm sorry you didn't win the competition, but would you like to come and design a school on my patch," which we ended up doing. We then also designed a number of projects for the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew. I started my career working for Norman Foster, and my boss at Foster's was a wonderful man called Spencer de Grey, and he rang up one Christmas Eve and said, we've got this, he was a trustee, and he said, we've got this awful project at Wakehurst Place that looks like a garden centre, and we want to change architects, but you're going to have to design a project with a very, very low budget. So we did that. We built the visitor centre on the left at Wakehurst Place, which is a sort of sister garden of the main botanic gardens at Kew. And that we won our first RRBA award with that project, actually. And then we went on to design about 7 projects for the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew. And they've just come back to us now, many, many, many years later, and asked us to do another project for them, which is we're waiting to hear about. So I just want to talk a little bit about, so that was, I could have talked to you about lots and lots of projects. We've built over 100 buildings. We've entered competitions and we've won other projects that never happened. But we've never, a lot of people who go into practice also teach and do all sorts of other things. And we never really did that. We just built. We thought, what do we know how to do? We know how to design buildings. We know how to build. So we built up this body of work, and what you sort of need alongside that is to get some sort of recognition for that work, because the work speaks for itself. Or the work needs to speak for itself. So along the way, we started to, as well as winning competitions and winning work through competitions, we started winning awards. And although awards are not much use in themselves, they are quite good for just getting people to know who you are. So the project on this project is the project on the left is one of the Building Schools for the Future project. The project on the right is the one I was telling you about, which is called Cobbler's Lane. It's a primary school in Wakefield, that we built after we didn't win the Hepworth Gallery. The exemplar primary school that I was telling you about before, that we did for the government as a piece of research, turned into all of those projects. We built many primary schools, and they were all up and running and open and successful. We then, having tried everything we could think of to win a competition for an art gallery, we were finally given one, sort of handed it on a plate by the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew, who said, "Would you like to design a gallery of botanical art for us?" And we said, "Yes, please." So we designed this very tiny little glass box at Kew, and it had to be a sort of box within a box. So within the we thought, how do you design an art gallery in the middle of a botanic garden that has to be dark all the time, because these botanical drawings are very precious. So the inner box can be blacked out completely and completely conditioned for these very precious works of art. But where you circulate, and this building connects to another building, you can see out and see the gardens. So that building's been there for many years now, and they've actually worked their way through the whole collection of botanical drawings, and are now starting to put on big blockbuster exhibitions by well-known artists, which the building's not really designed for, but they need to use it for something. And then there's the last project we did as part of this. As part of the work we did as part of the Building Schools for the Future. In fact, probably the last project to slip through the gates before they shut off the funding was this building in Camden Town, London. It's called Regent High School. We had to keep an existing Victorian board school and then add to it. And it was a very complex inner city school. The building was built over 14 phases of work. The school had to remain in operation the whole time while we were building. It was an amazing project. It won all kinds of awards, including the RIBA Sustainability Award for the year that it was finished. I'm a governor at the school. It's been a sort of, feels like a lifelong commitment to this client and this project. But it's an extraordinary school. It serves an inner city community, and it's just been wonderful to see what a built environment can do for the confidence and the sort of the outcome of a school. There's 1,500 students in this school. It's packed into a tiny little site jammed in between Euston and King's Cross stations. But it's another project that we're incredibly proud of. We don't only do schools, and we specifically have tried not to only do schools. So and I'll come back to that theme as well. But this was a project that just came along, another competition that we won. It's a boat building academy. So it's where you go and learn how to make boats, but it was historically where little boats were made that were used in the war effort. And it's another project that's done rather well in terms of awards. And it's quite photogenic, so people like it, and it's been published all over the place. So it's been a great project for us too. And many more. The image on the far left is it's a project for a school called Godolphin and Latimer. All we really did was build this tiny, quite small infill building on top of an existing kind of arcade. So the only bit that's new is this bit up here, which is a library. And this, we call it sewing, but we sort of dropped this little building into a mess of existing buildings, and then connected it up on multiple levels. So you never really know if you're in the new or the old. And it's in terms of bang for buck, or maximizing the impact of this project, it's just been incredible. And you can see at the bottom the library space internally, which is all built out of CLT, is rather wonderful. The next one along is the American School in London, another competition winning project in the centre of London. It was an art school, but it was in a conservation area, very complicated. The next one along is a primary school in one of the East London boroughs called Newham, and that's also been seems to have captured people's attentions. And the one on the right is on the Isle of Wight, and it's called Ride School. But as I said, more than 100 projects built. We've completed many master plans, and then won all these awards and entered all these competitions and been shortlisted for many more than we've ever won. And I think the most sensible architects become quite commercial at some stage. We I think probably slightly stupidly never did that. We've remained a design-led, research-led practice. And that's what we still are, and it kind of is what defines us. But we don't, we've never really worked for big developers. We'd like to, if you know any, please send them our way. But we don't, it's never really been our thing. And architects we're not trained at all to run businesses. I mean, I'm in awe of some of my friends who, even some of my classmates from when we started architecture, who've been very successful in terms of running their businesses. And I'm not sure we were in that class when they were teaching that. And then on we go. So the project on the far left again is St Paul's Boys' School. Then moving along is Laidsland. This is a primary school in Scotland. This is a library for a secondary school in Surrey. And doing these education projects has given us the opportunity to do just about anything. Some of these schools projects are sort of back edge of pavement in the middle of the city. Some of them are on a canal in leafy rural Scotland. Others give us the opportunity to do libraries or sports centres or performance spaces or dining spaces. I mean, there's anything you could almost any typology you could think of, we've had to do as part of building this portfolio of it, mainly education projects. And then finally, we've been trying to break into the university sector for many years. And we won a competition to design a building for Newnham College in Cambridge, which is a women's college. The college is surrounded by is defined by buildings that were designed by Basil Champneys, starting in 1875 and going through to about 1915. These buildings kind of marched around a courtyard and created these beautiful sort of inner gardens. And we had to demolish a building that was kind of on its last legs and make way for this new project. And it was again quite a challenging planning context. We were, surrounded by listed buildings, and we came up with this idea for a brick building, taking its cues from the Basil Champneys buildings in terms of proportion and detailing, and then these very highly crafted brick facades. So on the lower, the perforated brick on the lower level allows you to open the windows with no security issues, and also you don't have to open then the big windows on either side because the ventilation is provided through the perforated brick. And this sort of dog's tooth brick was an idea that exists in the Basil Champneys buildings. That was a sort of arts and crafts detail that we picked up on. We were able to design. It's mainly a residential building, so most of it is student bedrooms. But there's also on it creates this area of new garden, and at the center of it, there's a new entrance and a new cafe. So that project has led to us winning other work in sort of for universities. We're currently doing another project in Cambridge and another one in Oxford. And this project, again, it must have just been, I think it was in the right place at the right time. But we, it won tons of awards, and it was nominated for the Mies van der Rohe Award, which is something, you can enter awards yourselves, but you can't nominate yourself for the Mies van der Rohe Award. So that was something that we were pretty chuffed about. I think as well as winning competitions, we have, which is our main way of winning new work. We also do a huge amount of repeat work for existing clients. I've mentioned the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew, which we did 7 projects for. This is the King's School in Canterbury, and our client from Bedale School, a wonderful man called Mark Taylor, moved to the King's School in Canterbury, and we've done 7 projects for them since he moved there. One was a boarding house, one was a day house, one was this international college, which has got this marvelous core 10 cladding, and so all the teaching and office and communal spaces on the lower level and arranged around this courtyard, and then the bedrooms are on the upper level. And this building, is a kind of, I think it's quite a good example of how we work. So you can see, back to this theme of the roof and the walls being the same. In this case, this not just the same color, but the same material. And we realized, because it was core 10, we realized quite early on in one of the very early design reviews that we did, that if we didn't work out where the water was going, this wasn't going to work. So we stopped, drew up a one-to-one detail of the gutter, which is concealed up here, worked out where the water was going to go, and then carried on. And that's kind of how we design. We do a lot of design reviews in the office, and we sort of zoom into the detail and then zoom back out again, just to make sure that whatever we think, whatever whizzy idea we've come up with conceptually, we know is actually buildable and is going to stand the test of time. The last building we built for the King's School, which has just been finished, is this building's called the Rousing Centre. It's a science building. It was an absolute nightmare trying to get permission in the Canterbury Cathedral precincts, literally surrounded by and attached to listed buildings on all sides. But we managed to design a building using very traditional materials, and that, but still keep it pretty crisp and contemporary. It's linked through into the adjacent building with this little glass glazed link. And internally, there's a series of rather quirky science labs that were what they needed most in this part of the school. So that's been something that we've enjoyed finishing off. Then, we've also taken our knowledge and to other places. So this is a project for Somerset College in the Western Cape. It's an STEAM centre, so that the normal STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, art, maths, and they added enterprise on the front. And it's just a big space that they can do whatever they like in, and they mainly use it as they use it as teaching space, of course, but they also hold all their end of year exhibitions in there, and they do all kinds of experimental work in this building, which has been successful for them. We did a bit of work in Nairobi for a school, and the woman who one of the women teaching at the school ran a mental health charity called Camille. They got given some containers, and so we just helped them put together this little tiny project in Nairobi that is now a mental health clinic, and they have a number of these around the place. So we've worked in the Americas, we've worked in Asia. We're hoping to start a project soon in Japan. So although we're a small office, we've only ever had one office. We've never been more than 30 people. We've actually worked in a lot of different countries. We're hoping to be working in Pakistan quite soon. So there was this point, I suppose, that I got to about 20 years in, of thinking, is that enough? You know, is it just working all the time and designing buildings and entering and winning competitions and running this practice? Is that all that it's going to be? And I decided to do a PhD. I can highly recommend, if you ever want to do a PhD, don't try and do it part-time. It's an absolute nightmare. So it took me absolutely ages to do it. Well, it took me ages to figure out what I wanted to do it on, and then it took me even longer to finish it, because it was virtually impossible to find the time in sort of raising a family and busy practice to actually do a PhD. But the image on that sheet, on that slide, is that my sort of concept sketch for the Vajrasana, the Buddhist retreat that I showed you on the very first image. And in a very circuitous way, I ended up doing most of my PhD about this project, because it was a project that had, it was for a Western Buddhist order, so there was no precedent, theological or architectural. So we kind of had to go back to the beginning and build this up as on sort of first principles. So I'll come back to the PhD, because it was, so it was just very interesting for me to go right back to the beginning. This is the Temple of Apollo at Vassi, or Bassi, as it's spelt with a B, but pronounced Vassi. And I mean, you know, we were incredibly fortunate, I believe, in our when we were being taught at Durban University. We had amazing teachers: Barry Bierman, Rodney Harbour, Ted Tolman, Brian Carney, Dennis Claude, Wally Peters, who I think I just saw on the call, Derek Wang. Derek Wang was teaching us about sustainability 40 plus years ago, you know, in a way that schools of architecture in this country are still not teaching. So I feel incredibly privileged. In at the end of second year, I went on a mini version of a grand tour. Went to Greece and Italy with a friend, Eric Woods Hansen. And I said to Barry Bierman, where should we go? And he said, you've got to go to two buildings. You've got to go and see the Temple of Apollo at Bassi, and you've got to go to see the Church of Santa Maria dell'Assunta in Venice. Don't bother about anything else. Just go to those two projects. He didn't say why. So Eric and I trekked up to this temple and slept the night there, and had one of the most extraordinary nights of my life. Just marveling at this architectural bit of genius. I actually went back there last year, and it's now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's covered with a big white tent, and it was a very, very different experience. But this idea of positioning something so perfect and so pure in this crazy landscape, and making the most of the elements, you know, the sun and the moon, and was just something that had such a powerful impact on me. So I used this as an example when we were designing the Buddhist retreat, about how you position a building on the site and how you make the most of the elements. And then we did go to Venice. Venice, the Venice was a revelation, as it still is. I did go and see the Santa Maria Assunta Church, and called the Gesuiti. It was incredible. But the thing that blew me away, and it was gone by then, because it was 84, and the Venice Biennale, where Aldo Rossi's floating theatre had it had been dismantled. All there was an exhibition of what it was like. But I just was so impressed by the conceptual purity of this building. It was made out of one material. And this idea that you'd put this building on a sort of a tugboat and tow it around Venice and moor it wherever you could, while performances were going on. I just thought it was such an incredible idea. So I used this idea as, you know, to explain conceptual purity and continuity of materiality between inside and out. Then some years later, I had the privilege of going to see La Tourette Monastery by Le Corbusier, and staying the night there. And getting permission somehow from the monks to go up onto the roof with a bottle of red wine and sit there and watch the sunset. I mean, can you imagine anybody allowing you to do that now? But I went with my friend Gideon Scott, and we just, I just couldn't, I've never recovered from that trip. It was just the most amazingly powerful architecture I've ever experienced. But I was fascinated to read many years later that Le Corbusier spent many, many years thinking about this project and working with the community, working with the monastic community. And before they even started the design, before he put, pen to paper, there was so much work that went into thinking about what it was as a, conceptually, which is our craft, as architects. Then, many years later, so I used La Tourette to explain all of that to these clients, and they were pretty blown away by too. And then I went on an RIBA validation visit to Chile, and on the last day we had a little bit of spare time, and I said to somebody who we were with, is there anything we should go and see? And he said, oh, have you seen this chapel, this Benedictine chapel? And I said, no, because I'd never been to Chile before. Went and had a look, and I walked into the space, and it was just such a knockout. This idea that it was so simple. It's there's nothing to it. It was built out of nothing, and it's got these slots where the light comes in, and all you're aware of when you're in this very, very simple space is that the sun's moving outside, and the light just moves across the walls, and it was just this purity and simplicity was just something that I was determined to incorporate into the Buddhist retreat building. And then finally back to Peter Zumthor and this incredible, the Bruderklaus Chapel, and back to this idea of atmosphere and weathering. And, the building was built by, building a pyre of logs and then burning them. So the inside is black and sort of charred, and this idea of charring and blackness and the interior being dark was another theme that carried its way through into this project. So I wrote most of a PhD about the process of working with of this idea of this shared experience and working with this client who'd never built a building before, who designing a building almost from scratch, where there was nothing you could look on. You couldn't go onto Pinterest or Design and think, find one that somebody had made earlier. And so anyway, I finished the PhD, graduated, and this was a little exhibition that we put on because Jonathan Hill, one of my fantastic supervisors, sadly passed away. So his PhD is at one end of this little rack, and mine's at the other end. And that the Buddhist Retreat Project started with this extraordinary team of people, extraordinary client. This person here was trained as an architect and then became an ordained Buddhist. And she was our sort of main point of contact, our main client. And we kept a little farmhouse that was on the site, and then arranged these buildings around the farmhouse. And the shrine room, where all the meditation practice happens, is in this taller space. And then the residential component is in these sort of pitched roofs, and the communal buildings, dining and kitchen and living space are in this long barn. And the buildings arranged around these three courtyards, and we had to have these sort of archetypal elements because it's a Buddhist retreat, so we had to have a stupa, which they designed, actually the client group designed. But and then all these ideas all came together: the darkness of the brick, the perforation, the simplicity of the form, the axial relationship between spaces, the orientation, the use of light. And when we opened the building a few years ago, I sat there thinking, is this all going to work? It could just be a big disaster. Nothing, they could just hate it, or they talk about deepening their practice. And I thought it could just be a big distraction and nobody will come and nobody will like it, as you tend to think when you sort of worrying about things for nothing. And people started to come, and they, hundreds and hundreds of people came to the opening, and it extraordinary watching people just start to very naturally use this building exactly the way we'd conceived it, exactly the way we designed it. And, it's a very relaxing place. People just naturally sort of fall into conversation and feel very at peace when they arrive. And the another archetypal element being the Buddha figure itself was another. I could do a whole lecture on that, but I won't. But the image on the left is a men's ordination retreat where they designed their robes specifically for this building to pick up on the blue in the brickwork. I mean, they look after this building. It's really a very joyful thing to have, to design a building for a client who then looks after it with so much love and care. But these perforations in the upper level of the shrine room were there so that there's no distraction when you're at the low level, when you're meditating, but you're aware of this light moving and change, the light coming and going, the sun, a cloud passing in front of the sun. And these ideas came directly from the project, the precedent projects that I talked to you about earlier. And the darkness of the interior was, completely inspired by Zumthor's Broeder Klaus Chapel. And it was something that, we were very nervous about. We didn't know if it would work. But it does. And when you're there at night and the sun's gone down and everybody's in this space and all you see is this Buddha figure lit from behind in this kind of golden niche, the building just sort of melts away and there's no, you feel as though you're in a forest or something, and if the walls had been white, that wouldn't have happened. So, and this is one of the courtyards that our client and the wonderful architect who worked with me on the project, Lucrezia, are chatting about some snagging, no doubt. But a wonderful photographer called James Newton went there on a retreat, and he just said, and I was just so touched by his words. He said, as a place for retreat, it works beautifully. The architecture functions very well, but has the modesty to step aside as one's perception change and the focus shifts inward. The building seems to dissolve, allowing natural surroundings to come to the fore. I now remember it not for how it looks, but for how it feels, which was what we set out to try and achieve. And so I'm very glad somebody agreed that we had managed to achieve that. So very quickly then, because I know I've been talking for almost an hour, I mentioned at the beginning this idea of this privilege that we have as practitioners of being able to use our practice as a springboard for doing other things. That image is of a David Chipperfield project that was the winning competition entry for a competition that I was on the jury for as the architectural advisor to the London School of Economics. And it's a rather fantastic project that reuses an existing building. And what they've done is a subject of another lecture, but is in terms of upcycling and reuse of existing materials is extraordinary. So, I've spent a lot of my career doing lots of different sort of public engagements, from being on the Royal Gold Medal Honours Committee, where we selected Yasmin Lari and Leslie Loco one year after the other, chairing the Architecture Foundation. I mentioned being a governor of Regent High School, which is something I'm very proud of, because it just feels like a very kind of important thing to do. But just, lots of academic engagements, lots of competitions where I've been on the other side of the table, which, as well as being incredibly enjoyable, is also really valuable for your own practice. Watching, people like David Chipperfield and Grafton architects present their schemes and win a competition, you learn a few tricks yourself. And I think that's something that I do and enjoy. And the future, well, who knows? You tell me. This is our studio in London. We have a big table where we do most of our reviews and we eat and we talk about all sorts of things. Yesterday we were there having tea for Michelle's birthday, eating just beautiful scones that she'd made. I really lucked out with my business partner. I mean, she is an extraordinary person. And, we started as friends 43 3 years ago we met. Is that right? Yeah. Anyway, I lose track. And we've stayed friends. We run this business together. We do everything together. We probably spend more time together than we do with our partners, our life partners. It's an amazing thing. The building on the left is one of our most recently almost completed buildings. It's for a school in North London. And you can see it looks remarkably like our office on the right, which is our 25th birthday, not that many years ago now. So I don't know what the future looks like. I think it looks like we'll be working in other countries, which is great, which is very exciting. We are in the process of working out what to do about succession and what to do about handing over the practice. But any of you who've tried that will know it's not that straightforward. But anyway, those conversations are in progress. And whatever happens, it will have just been an enormous privilege to run this practice with Michelle and do the work that we've done. And it all started in Durban, and which is something we never forget. So thank you. And I think we've probably got about half an hour for some questions if anybody has any. But thank you very much for inviting me. I really appreciate it, and it's been a pleasure.
Cindy, thank you so much. And that talk is very relatable to people in KZN especially, because you definitely still are one of us in the institute. Thank you so much. Congratulations on what your practice has achieved. You managed to achieve so much in terms of value with such a small palette of colors and materials. So that is absolutely amazing to see throughout your work. I wanted to find out from you what in creating this kind of architecture, what to you is most fulfilling?
I think just designing, but really feeling this, getting to a point where you feel like you've kind of getting it right, and that's a huge challenge. It's a team effort. There's never, architecture is never just about one person or one skill set. You really need to work closely with so many different people to make sure you've got the M&E and the structure and the landscape and everything very well coordinated. But I think when you know that it's starting to sing, when you know that you've cracked a really complicated problem on a constrained site with difficult, lots of things that you have to take into consideration, and you think you've done it. You've got something that's kind of value for money. And when I say that, I don't mean value for money literally. It's kind of doing lots of different jobs. It's working really hard. It's starting to be exciting and interesting conceptually. I think that's for me is the most interesting part of what we do. And we run pretty much constant design reviews in our office, so we're always tweaking and improving what we do for the projects, for the clients. So there's that's kind of at one end of the spectrum, and then for me the other end is the relationships with those people. So we have clients we've been working with for almost as long as our practice has been going. We have clients with whom we've done multiple projects, and these people become friends. They ask our advice when they want to do the next project, or when they want to do something to the project we designed for them 20 years ago. And so that's also something that gives me a lot of pleasure.
Great. Thank you, Cindy. Open to questions and comments. And Cindy, talking about now realizing design, Have you just been fortunate enough to work with good builders, or what has your journey been like in realizing that this is one thing to conceptualize something, it's another to realize it. Most of your buildings don't scream a lot from the outside, but when you walk in, you appreciate the space, you appreciate how it's put together, you appreciate the detail. What has been your journey, your experience with builders in the UK?
Well, very mixed. We've worked with some incredible builders. I think the guys who built the KZNSA Gallery were pretty amazing. They were called Jacoby and Nickel. I don't know if they're still around, but they were brilliant. And actually, the people who built the building were part of a training program, so they were learning on the job. Best builders I ever worked with in my life were when we built the house in Sydney. They literally snagged their own building and handed it back to us, and there was nothing. It was perfect. There was literally nothing we could criticize. In the UK, very, very mixed bag. It depends on the procurement route. If you design and build, contracts tend to be a little bit harder to control the quality. But the project I showed you at Newnham College in Cambridge, that was a design and build contract, and we managed to achieve pretty good quality because the builder was amazing. The contractor was extraordinary. We've worked with some terrible contractors, and it just becomes such a struggle. It's one of the reasons why I loved the Buddhist retreat project so much, because it really taught me something about working with contractors. Their approach, the Buddhist approach, was they accept that things go wrong, which they do. Things go wrong on building projects all the time. But there was no blame culture. There was no passing the buck. They were like, right, we've got a problem, let's deal with it. And it made for such a constructive atmosphere and such a kind of happy project. And everybody just went, the extra mile without even asking for extra fees, or it was just one of those projects. And I think so often in the construction world, things become very confrontational, and it just gets you nowhere. So we've, there's certainly not the case that we've had to work with extraordinary builders. Every now and then we've had the opportunity of working with an amazing contractor, and that's always a joy. But a lot of the time, it's a partnership, and you've got to actually just figure out how you're going to work together and try and help each other out. That seems to be to me the best way, or the way to get the best results.
Great, thanks, Cindy. Comments, questions, colleagues? Prof. Peters.
Can I speak? Richard
Prof.
Streeter.
Peters, and then Richard.
Thank you, Scrub.
Richard.
I just wanted to say, Cindy, that was brilliant. It's exactly what I expected from you. Thank you very much indeed, and kind regards to Michelle as well. Thank you.
I will certainly pass that on. Thanks, Wally.
Thanks, Wally. Mr. Stratton.
Morning, everybody. Can you hear me? I'm driving.
Hi.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Cindy, thanks so much. There's something you said in your final comments that I just found really important, and it's something that comes up when I work with students, because it's this notion of what a concept is in a building, and I find it gets overcomplicated, and you describe it so well, because it really is the idea that stitches all of the complexities of a building, be they structural, be they mechanical, electrical, be they circulatory, be they lighting, be they construction methodology, and who's building it. But the resilience of a concept is the idea that ties those things together. It's not some important abstract idea of aesthetic, but somehow I don't come across a lot of students who taught this in university. And the idea of a concept is something about the way a building looks. I also really like the way you speak about your buildings in terms of the way they feel, because the feeling of a building to me is the indelible memory of a building. How they look is a very difficult thing to kind of translate and understand, because they're three-dimensional and complex and procedural. So those are just two takeaways I got from your speech that I found, although your talk or whatever, that I found really like, deep and learned, and I'm grateful for those. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, when you go to see a building, I think maybe we don't go and see enough buildings. I think, there's so much you learn from visiting buildings and that you can't see. We live in this visual world now where you're looking at images constantly on Pinterest, on Instagram, on, or any platform. And it's all about the visual image. And when you walk into a place that just, takes your breath away, you can't capture that really in an image. And it's jolly hard to achieve. So, I think I always say to students, please just go and visit buildings, and I'm so grateful to my teachers for saying to me, when I was 19, go and see this building. It's very, very important. It will be very important for the rest of your life. I'm very grateful to Barry Bierman for making me go to the Temple of Apollo. It literally has been, a love affair that stayed with me for the rest of my life. It literally changed my life. So, that's I think, and that's not, okay, maybe not everybody can travel to other countries, but you don't have to. You can stay in your own country. You can see Durban's full of the most extraordinary buildings. So, yeah, I think looking at buildings, seeing through the end of your pencil is probably quite a good idea.
Now, Cindy, you've spoken about.
Can I say something? Can I say something?
Oh, okay, Ruth. Good to have you.
I
I didn't
guess
see you.
I guess I've got to say something. She's been speaking about dark spaces, so I'll stay in the dark.
You're not supposed to be here, really. You're supposed to be watching your kids running.
I'm in Bloemfontein, in a very wet, cold Bloemfontein, but I wasn't going to miss it. Even though I said to Cindy yesterday that I was going to miss it because I'm watching my girls take part in a national athletics competition. But I guess I better say something before Dean J says it because he'll cry.
He's here.
He's there, yes, he's there. So I saw that there were two others was Dean and Kate Otten on the call from that incredible class of 82. And to the 180 odd people who've watched this thing, you've just seen and heard the best of that class of 1982. That class, some are jealous that they weren't part of it. There are others who don't believe us that we were an incredible class, but we were, and it shows in the quality of the work that Cindy has presented here today. I've seen some of it. I'd like to see more of it. And yeah, so as a group, we've kind of grown senior together. I've grown old, others have just moved on. But thank you so much. I think sharing this with people who've only just heard about your work and talk about the great things you've done is a huge opportunity. And thank you.
Thanks, Rubes. Thanks. I'm glad you could make it. And I'm very humbled by the number of people that are on this call. It's quite something. It was still dark when we started this morning for me, and it's now the sun's come up finally. But yeah, it's lovely. I feel very. I really genuinely agree with that comment about our extraordinary class. I'm probably embarrassed Dean now if he's still on the call, but I went to. I was in Cape Town with him in January, and we went to the opening of his war memorial for the Commonwealth War Graves for the Labour Corps in Cape Town, and it's a thing of enormous beauty, and it was just I was just so proud to be there as a guest and see the unveiling of this extraordinary thing that had so much meaning on so many levels, but just you can't design something like that without tremendous skills. So, and again, back to what Rich Stretton was saying, this conceptual clarity and purity, which is something that I think we so often drift away from. And it's quite hard to maintain that. So it was wonderful to see that, it's still alive and well in that, in our class, from our class of 82, which seemed kind of, I don't know, by coincidence or somehow to end up with having some quite extraordinary people in it who've all gone on to do okay for themselves. Ros. Hi, Ros.
I just want to say that Rodney Harbour always spoke of the class of 1982 as one of the most amazing ones that he'd ever taught. And his stories from the class, as you all went through the whole process, are absolutely amazing. And I wish they could be repeated. But they'll get to be put in the book sometime.
Well, I some of my fondest memories of involved Rodney, and they always seemed to be somewhere in the Berg, and there was a whole group of us, and we were always just having the most extraordinary time. And I'm sure there was some architecture involved somewhere, but I think it was mostly about getting us out into nature and just getting us to appreciate that, which is as important as anything else. So I'm very grateful to Rodney for those amazing times we all had.
Thank you, Ruben. Thank you, Ross. Could you please mute yourself, Ross? Thank you. Cindy, with the career spanning decades, I know that you did speak about not going fully commercial. UK has got quite large practices. You have been very successful. I think sometimes it takes us sitting down and looking back to what you've achieved to realize, actually, I'm probably a good business person apart from being a good designer. What could you share in terms of your experience on how you now see business and how you've improved your business? Because it doesn't look like you've dropped the ball in how you want to practice architecture. And at the same time, your business is running. So that's a great achievement.
Yeah. We're still running. I guess that is a great achievement. I hesitate to say that we should learn more about running a business at university, because I'm not sure that's the right place to learn about it. But when you at university, you probably need to learn how to think. We did have to learn on the job, about running a business. And we've always been very cautious. I think that's because we started in a recession, and nobody had any money and there was no work, and we really had to be very conscious about money. And we've always kept a cash flow and kept a close eye on it, and not spent money that we didn't have. We try not to owe anyone money, so there's we bought a building that we run our practice out of, which we just managed to pay off the other day. So we've done things that I suppose have been a little bit savvy in terms of business, but really it's hard work. It's taken us a long time to get to the point where we are, I think, managing the business well, not spending too long on things, not just letting the job take as long as it takes, not frittering away all the fee, on the early stages of the job and ending up running out of fee in the later stages. I've been fascinated to find out that, even very well-known and reputable firms like, Chipperfield and practices like that in this country, they don't run their jobs on site. They don't deliver their own projects. That's where we lose money, hand over fist on almost every job. So just being aware and conscious of how you run your business is just it's just liberating. If you're not constantly worrying about money and where the next, how you're going to pay salaries and all of that stuff every month, it just frees you up to do other things. but we've had some pretty hairy times along the way, and we have had to borrow money every now and then, and we've sailed a bit too close to the wind on many occasions, not intentionally, not our own fault. Often external factors, the economy, political situation, jobs just, we've got a terrible problem in this country at the moment with the planning system, where jobs just take forever to get through planning. The planning system is broken, as you probably heard. But it's so there've been times when we've had to really dig deep and think, God, what are we doing here? And one of them was last year. So it doesn't get easy. And there have been many times when I've wished that we'd become a big commercial practice and had lots of money in the coffers. But yeah, you have to, you make your own bed, I suppose. I definitely think some being focused on, if I was giving any advice to my younger self, it would have been to be far more business savvy, or being far more conscious of the importance of running a good business, and being profitable, and not having to, so that you don't have to worry all the time, would have been. I wish someone had given me that advice.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Cindy. I think that was such a complete lecture. Any other comments or questions?
I can't see any other hands up.
Can be good. Thank you so much once again, Cindy. What would be your last words? And thank you for waking up so early to be part of the talk. What would be your last words?
I don't know. I was talking to a young guy yesterday who's done his part one, his first part of his degree, and was saying to me, do you think I should do the next part of my degree? And I said, well, do you want to be an architect? And he said, I don't know, maybe I want to be a property developer. I said, well, decide what you want to do, and then, don't qualify as an architect unless you really want to practice as an architect. I think I don't know how to do anything else. I love what I do. I've always loved it from the moment I stepped into that School of Architecture, in 1982. It's been a love affair. I can't imagine doing anything else. It's far more of a vocation than a job for me. And I think it's the most fantastic job in the world. I wouldn't want to do anything else, but I think it's also hard, and it's hard to maintain it. So I think, and in order to kind of maintain your skill, interest, passion, whatever, it's kind of an ongoing job. So I don't know. I don't know what else to say other than that I think if we are lucky to be, I believe in have one of the best jobs in the world that you can have, and just keep doing it, because we are, everyone's talking about AI taking away our jobs, and everyone else kind of snapping at the heels of architects. I think we need to kind of dig quite deep and realize that what makes us valuable is our ability to be critical thinkers, our ability to be conceptual thinkers, and I don't know if I don't think any machine's going to be able to take that away from us. So yeah, that's some parting words.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cindy. I think you've flown the KZN flag, UKZN flag, quite high. The institute is very, very proud of you, your achievements with your practice, and may you have many more great years ahead of you and your company.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it, and I enjoyed it. Thanks a lot. Thanks for all the great questions.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone. We'll see you on the next one.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Cindy. Cheers.